Government documents and whistleblower experiences have given extensive proof of alien cover-ups, extraterrestrial abductions, and cow mutilation investigations. It's no longer in the realm of crazy to believe we're not alone in this universe. But there's something strange and even maybe nefarious about the sudden acceptance of little green men. Over the years, secret disinformation experts formerly employed by the government have come forward describing how they were tasked with manipulating the alien narrative. Why? To steer the public towards certain beliefs, and they claim they've succeeded in infiltrating the field of ufology. So the big question has changed. It's no longer, are there aliens among us, but if the government actually wants people talking about aliens, why? And what crazier truths are they trying to distract us from? Today, in part one, we'll dive into the secret disinformation war going on right under our noses. Then next time, in part two, we'll discuss the infamous Dulce firefight that happened in a secret underground military base in New Mexico, which all this is leading to. Join me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, and remote viewer John Vivanco for a metaphysical show that's out of this world. Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome to have you in the studio.
Yeah, good to be here.
Well, today we're going to be talking about crazy happenings around the Dulce firefight, which is probably one of the deepest rabbit holes in the UFO history that we have. We found that a lot of the information revolves around two men, one being Paul Bennewitz and the other being Phil Schneider. And I think in this episode, we're going to concentrate on Paul Bennewitz Jr., who was a PhD. He had a PhD in physics. He was a World War II radio electronics engineer for the Coast Guard. Now, he was investigating UFOs and cattle mutilations in the New Mexico area, which all led him down this path. And in 2013, there was a documentary called Mirage Men. I highly recommend you guys checking this out. It may change your perceptions on UFOs and how the U.S. government, I guess you could say, interferes with information and psychological operations in the UFO community. In Mirage Men, basically, it talks about how government agents first identified him at a meeting of Arizona's Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, or APRO. There were reported strange lights and unusual radio signals over Kirtland Air Force Base. This is where Paul Bennewitz's rabbit hole began, I believe, that and the cattle mutilations. He wrote to a U.S. Senator, Pete Domenici, in 1981, that, quote, sometime late 79 or first of 80, an argument ensued over weapons and the military abandoned Dulce base. The final circumstance of the men was unknown. Yeah, let's start it there, I think, in terms of laying the groundwork for what we're going to be getting into today. And then we'll be getting into a lot of information you've never heard, because we have remote viewer John Vivanco on the show, who has a lot of peripheral information around this stuff that really broadens the story in a way that I think I haven't heard it told this way.
Yeah, I think with this whole story, starting with Bennewitz is the true beginnings of it. It's not Phil Schneider. Phil Schneider is the second part of the story. Bennewitz was, he lived right next to Kirtland and the Manzano Weapons Depot, where most of the nuclear weapons of the United States were stored. And he was an electrical engineer who had a company who was servicing like NASA, government contracts, even stuff for the Air Force. So he was very aware of that base because he did have dealings with them. PhD in physics, the guy was brilliant, understood radio. He understood radio signals. That was his big thing. So he's, this is like the 1979 era, and he's basically from his house, because the vantage point from his house of the Kirtland Air Force Base, he's higher than it. He had noticed that these lights would appear in the area where the nuclear weapons were kept, and they would move up very fast and then move very fast across the mountain range and then drop down. Sometimes they would be flying around in the base, and I think he took video of this stuff. So his thought was to see if there's any radio transmission coming off of these things, whatever they were. I don't believe that he was into the UFO phenomena at that point, aliens, UFOs. I don't believe that he was into it, but this sort of gradually drew him in. So he started to monitor radio frequency channels, and he had noticed that there were repeatable patterns in radio frequency coming from these things. And he believed that these things were communicating with a base that was in Dulce or on Jicarilla Mesa, on the Jicarilla Native Reservation. He collected tons of data about this, what was going on, and he took it straight into Kirtland Air Force Base.
Yeah.
So what he wanted to do was have a meeting with the higher ups at the base to show them, tell them what he's found and how concerning this is, because he was a patriotic American. You know, he had worked for the government. He was, World War II. He had worked for the government for a long time. He was genuinely trying to help them understand and him understand what the heck is going on here, and there could be a security breach, right? So he goes in there and takes it to the higher ups. They give him a meeting. They actually give him a meeting where he presents his data and information, and then they basically
chuckle at him.
I don't think they didn't chuckle at him. What happened, from what I understand, is that some of the top people walked away, just didn't say anything and walked away, and then Richard Doty got involved.
I was going to say, because Richard Doty, the way he describes that first meeting.
Right. So Richard Doty was
Yes.
the disinformation and intelligence officer. I don't know if he was an intelligence officer, but he dealt in disinformation for the Air Force. So they brought him in to work with him on what this was, right?
Yeah, and we wouldn't even know about, so just to give you an idea here, we wouldn't even know about Richard Doty if it wasn't for Linda Moulton Howe's work on researching the cattle mutilations. The way you described it to me is she ends up going head first into what you don't ever talk about.
Right.
And in the process, I mean, you could say discrediting herself, but she's kind of a badass when you look at it from that perspective.
If you watch that film, so back then, this is how Linda Moulton Howe was. If you look at her back then and look at what she was doing and her demeanor and what she said, she was very upfront.
Sharp.
She was a very blunt and excellent investigator. I think now what's happened is that you get to a certain point when you're in this field where you start at the very beginning, at the very basics. Well, like, if aliens are real, then what's the evidence or circumstantial evidence around it? You're not going to go, you're going to look at the government, you're going to talk to some of those people, but what you're mostly going to do is correlate stories between people. And so this creates a massive, massive basket of correlative info where the real research is not going and asking the government, and that's what she did. Right? So that's the very basic level to truly understand if there's something going on or not. When you start to go down that rabbit hole, it leads you deeper and deeper and deeper into more strange, crazy stuff. And this is what happens to a lot of people, is that they can get so disconnected from the beginning point where most people
Correct.
are, that they begin to sound absolutely insane. So when you get to the whole Dulce thing, this is top level insane conspiracy, the kind of stuff where it's like you see the people standing in front of a city council meeting and ranting and raving about something. This is that realm of like batshit crazy, right?
It's
absolutely.
Yeah, it's so.
That's how people perceive it,
Yeah.
because it's not first base. It isn't like, well, we think aliens might be real. Based on some of this, like, you just show very cogent evidence. This is like, we're fighting underground with aliens and they're stealing women and children, kind of, it's like it's that world.
It's
right?
gone, right. It's gone so far that.
And most people that don't know about the first base can't jump to like third base.
No,
right?
No, and we're still, as a collective human society, hardly at first base.
Right.
Which is what makes this, or these conversations, so challenging to traverse is.
Right.
how do you get someone at home base when everyone's still on first?
Right.
You can't not talk about the crazy. And then the more you talk about the crazy and the more you get in front of people whose perceived reality is making ends meet, going to the grocery store every day and dealing with family and relatives, it's so
I know.
bizarre.
This is part of the discrediting process. You keep the mass of the population just slightly, maybe only like a toe going towards first base, and then show the absolute craziness of someone who truly believes. Okay, so one thing that people really, really have to be aware of is that I would say like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, the internet had information leading down certain paths, much more rich information that was more spread out, more varied from different sources that you can find corroborative points on. I'm talking about like general UFO and alien information. And a lot of this stuff has closed down where those are no longer in existence into a tighter, smaller funnel. So one thing people have to realize is that when they do research on this stuff, they're not going to find the things that would lead them deeper into an understanding of this stuff anymore, because people aren't writing books anymore, right? They're
writing blogs.
They're writing blogs. Then those blogs are getting crushed by everything else, then disappeared when they had information that was important, and they're no longer in existence. So this is why I think people need to go back to writing books. People need to go back to
Print.
buying books, print, because we are going to lose more knowledge and more information on a lot of this stuff that we otherwise had.
Yeah, and you can see these shelves behind us have a lot of old books from between the 50s and the 90s, where people were writing a lot of this information in, and we've tracked down a lot of it when it comes to experiments, Soviet and American Cold War battles that have information you wouldn't otherwise get on the internet because you can kind of only find it here. It's how the world is right now.
Yeah.
Back to Paul Bennewitz. He's collating this information. He's seeing things he can't explain, might not even at the beginning believe in UFOs, but over time is starting to try to interact with government officials with the best intentions of just working this out. And like John said, some of these people are walking out the way it was described in Mirage Men, I think by Richard Doty. Can you ever really listen to one thing coming out of that guy's mouth?
Well, that's the thing.
That's 100% truthful.
He's a disinformation officer.
Correct.
So he was put as the handler, in a sense, for Bennewitz. He was funded with like 75, 80,000 to Bennewitz himself.
And even befriended Bennewitz.
Yeah. In order to research this phenomena more and then report back to them. So in that process, like Bennewitz goes deeper and deeper into it because now he feels like he's got a very important audience here. And he comes to the conclusion that they are aliens and that they are in communication with another alien base that is in the Dulce area. And so he also started to get involved in hypnotic regression of abductees, and one or two abductees had an experience when they were under that they were in Dulce in an underground base. There were aliens around, and they saw that there were vats full of human body parts and stuff like that, and experiments going on and things like that. Back at that time in the 70s, that sort of, in early 80s, that sort of idea was showing up in books as well. There were other people who were talking about this, other investigators, So as this sort of contingent of very hostile aliens that were doing bad things to people, to humans. And so he became really convinced of that. And they started to push him down that path, right? Really push him down that path. Their intention ultimately, as Richard Doty stated, that it was to, number one, he claims later on that there could have been holes to plug in the security around Kirtland Air Force Base and the Manzano weapons complex. They were working with him as a civilian because if he could do it, then the Soviets can do it, right? So there was that story, and then also, as this has been stated over and over again, that the UFO hypothesis is an excellent cover for any exotic technology that they're working on. We have to go to Bennewitz here, and we have to try to understand what was he seeing. You know, was this exotic technology that the Air Force was working on, or was this something else, right? Because Bennewitz claims it's aliens. The government claims it's a disinformation campaign to plug up their holes in tech and emissions or whatever. But what does, remote viewing say about this stuff? If you just look at history, like the Malmstrom UFO event, right, you have many areas across the United States at that time and before that, well, at Malmstrom, for instance, these lights appeared over the base and started to take off one by one the nuclear missiles in the silo, just shut them down, right? One by one, just started shutting them down. People witnessed the UFOs in the sky. Now we have UFOs over the Manzano weapons complex, which houses the most nuclear weapons that the United States has in one central location, right? So we have the same thing occurring here, right, of UFOs around the base. Now, we don't know what was going on with the weapons, but it's the same story, once again. And I think that when you get into this whole thing, this is like sticking your head into a blender if you're just looking at surface information, because even with remote viewing, it's like sticking your head into a blender, because disinformation campaigns are psychological operations in order to just scramble your brain. When we look at that with remote viewing, it does follow this pattern of different intelligences, non-human intelligence, checking and monitoring, because they're very interested in any like aberrant nuclear radiation signals and whatnot in the area, for one thing. We've seen this over and over again in remote viewing data, but we also have this sort of like connection to like military type intelligence with those craft, with those aliens. We also have exotic type of technology. So we've got a whole bunch of different things that are going on here. Here we're talking about the Air Force. We're talking about a more remote location. We're talking about an area where things are tested out in the desert that are coming from these Air Force bases. So even when we remote view this, we get this big, huge mixed bag of weird stuff. And so I think that most likely what this is so big. It's not like a small layer or sliver of a UFO incident. It is much bigger than that, much deeper, that goes into aspects where there's connection between the humans and whatever is on the UFOs.
Well, and enter Gabe Valdez, who was a state policeman and a retired scientist, and he was the director of a chemical laboratory which was investigating the intriguing possibility that cattle mutilations and a recent UFO sighting could be related. Gabe Valdez was finding some of the things that Linda Moulton Howe was researching, which were that the scenarios that these cattle mutilations had didn't match up with someone just interested in a few organs of the cattle.
Right. So wait. Gabe Valdez was a New Mexico patrol officer. I think he was State Highway Patrol, and he was stationed around the Dulce area.
Correct.
The Jicarilla Indian Reservation.
Correct.
And he was investigating cattle mutilations in that specific area, right?
Yes, he was investigating cattle mutilations, and he started finding things that didn't make any sense to him. He would find one of these cows that was just mutilated, that the body would not rot after 3 days. It just stayed in the same state. Then some of the fetuses, or the things that he was finding in some of these pregnant cows, they were also what seemed like human hybrids with animals, or alien hybrids within the cow that was being birthed through the cow. The very strange stuff like that.
Right. I think he made the claim that what it looked like was a cross between a monkey, a frog, and a human, one of the fetuses.
Which is super bizarre. How do you believe
But,
someone.
you know, I mean, if you listen to metaphysical, you know, if you listen to some of the stuff we've been talking about, like DNA and genetic experimentation is really just like your bank account when you're, you know, an alien, I guess. But, you know, they're always trying to like upgrade stuff from that. We try to upgrade our technology. They try to upgrade their bodies or their races or create other races that they can use for specific purposes. We see this all the time.
Right. And if you're having a hard time understanding that, what it seems like is that if there are aliens out there, their form of technology relies off of biotechnology more than anything. They've come to a point, what seems like a point in their technology. I guess you could say genetic hardware is their bag, what they're researching, what they're trying to constantly experiment with to progress their technology.
And I think this has also got the reference, you think, to Carter.
Okay, so Jimmy Carter was a extremely religious president. He got very curious about UFOs and ended up being perceived as a little bit wacky, especially during the last part of his presidency. Probably why he didn't win the election against Reagan. He reportedly, from the information that we can find, was so curious he started asking for information about aliens. And they put a document in front of him.
Because he had had a UFO sighting.
He had a UFO experience. Right. He was aware of remote viewers.
That's right.
There's actually audio of him talking about using remote viewing to help certain investigations that the U.S. government had going on. And now this is all during the 1970s when remote viewing is really being researched and used in
it's being
the
used
government.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, and the Cold War. He sees this document and apparently just totally crestfallen after this. He believes this document because it was given to him by people that he trusts. The document claims that the human race was manipulated by alien races in the remote past, and that we were created by genetic manipulation of these exotic creatures. And he can't come to terms with it. It really threw him for a loop. Now, the document that Linda Moulton Howe describes she was given in the Mirage Men documentary seems to be the exact same document that they gave Jimmy Carter. Richard Doty didn't say that it was the same document. Why would he give that information out? But if you look at those two, what was claimed to be in the document, they're almost identical in that Linda Moulton Howe is sitting there contemplating this document and trying to come to terms with the ramifications of the information, which are that if this is true, the human race is a race that are basically biological androids,
right,
that have been created by a superior, in quotes, superior exotic alien race, and that none of what we've been told by religion or think about is actually true.
It's like this like high level metaphor where it's not literal, but it's this high level metaphor.
It's basically the foundation for Ancient Aliens. I mean, let's be honest. Right. Like everything that Ancient Aliens harps on it revolves around this kind of concept, right. Which I'm not saying is 100% false, because I think there has been a lot of genetic manipulation. There could have been beings here way before the human race was here. Now, Richard Doty was going to these UFO conferences all through the 90s into the 2000s, deep into the 2000s. You can see him in that documentary. You know, he's engaging with people about UFOs, about alien beings, and we just don't know what his intentions were in any of this, right? Especially with his background as a disinformation agent.
Right. Well, okay, so there are some people who think, so getting to this thing of us being androids, like biological androids created by, you know, these aliens or whatever aliens, if you go into like the hypnotherapy type stuff of abductees, one of the investigations that hypnotherapists will do with the abductees is to ask them if on a soul level, if like, why are they having these experiences? Why are their genetics being changed, or they're taking their genetics, and they ask them if they've given permission on a soul level. And she said the majority, this one hypnotherapist, I can't remember her name, she said the majority were claimed that on a soul level they were part of them and that they were in agreement with this. A lot of people think that what this is with the abduction phenomena, at least in part, is to infiltrate from deep, deep, deep inside and then take over and assimilate, full assimilation with the human race, but bringing in the aliens so that they can control everything here. That's a fascinating thing, because then when you get into the implications of what Jimmy Carter was reading or what Linda Moulton Howe was reading, you have on the other side of it the abduction scenario that does seem to verify, if you believe that type of stuff, that does seem to verify those surface level documents, right?
It does.
Right.
Well, some of it does, but this is what the human world is such a complicated place. We're in a place where all of it could be true at once because there's so many different parties involved, so many different factions, and then there are old history and truths to the ancient books that we've read. And that's what makes it so complicated, I think.
Right.
And I think that it goes back to this thing that I was saying before, which is if alien races have, if they exist and they have cultivated their technology to coincide or to focus on genetic manipulation and genetic technology, right, along with whatever their AI systems are, they're valuing materials more than anything. Now you've got a whole scenario where they see something in the human race. In this episode, AI knows black magic and I have proof. What I go through is explaining how much access AI has to all of the information that's on these servers, these black servers, these black operation servers. If we think that AI isn't being given access to these, or that it can't just go in with the quantum computing technology that it's connected to, we would be completely naive. Okay, so you have AI having access to all of this information, constantly churning that information and coming to conclusions that are beyond the current human science pathway that we've taken. We have a situation here that is very, very bizarre, where, again, not only could it be true that there is a massive war that we're completely unaware of, trying to control and manipulate humans, but the question becomes why? Why would they be so interested? Well, if you go into the ancient books, every single book says that the human body was created by God or by a God, depending on which book you read and from which culture. Humans aren't even aware of the paraphysical stuff that they can do or that they have access to because we've gone down this scientific path where atheism rules science. I mean, that's just plain fact, okay? Humans don't really go down the path of researching or believing that things like remote viewing work, that when they're dreaming, there's more truth in those dreams, or that those dreams occur in other dimensions that are parallel to the dimension that we're currently operating in. We don't acknowledge any of that. It's even cutting edge physics now to believe that other dimensions exist. And the only reason we even know or think that they could exist is because there are some things that scientists are doing that are unexplainable, like quantum computing, for instance. How is that information coming back so fast? And when you talk to these guys that are at the forefront of quantum computing, they're claiming that quantum computing is doing math and pulling in information from other dimensions to get the information back faster. So other dimensions do, in fact, exist. Humans, at least the human surface race, hasn't even come to terms with this yet. So what humans can do and can accomplish are beyond normal. They are super normal. So the reason why aliens would be so focused on human genetic material, for one, if they've manipulated their own genetics to a point where it's become a cesspool of different genetics, they're trying to clean all of that up by using the human body to do so. If the human body was created by God, which every single book says, there's something special that they see in the genetics of human beings where they've become highly interested in. They've been trying to make deals and all of these things. I mean, we have all of this sort of information going back. This is information in the conspiracy world, of course, But here we are trying to put all of this together.
We haven't like genetically altered ourselves to the point where we could be a mess.
Ethics keeps us from
Right.
that.
So the majority of the human race is it's like clean cattle, it's like non-GMO'd cattle,
Right.
basically. And so in this time frame that we're in, that's what it is. So of course, I mean, I think they would it's a good blank slate.
It's a good blank slate. Be highly interested in it. Who knows what kind of experiments they would be wanting to do with it, because it's easier to use a clean genetic material, I'm assuming, than it would be something that's very convoluted.
Maybe.
You're constantly, like daisy chaining stuff together.
You bring up the other point too that I find interesting, and I think about the movie Her.
Yeah.
When you talk about this, because the movie Her was about AI being introduced to the population en masse. But that movie I thought was very interesting because AI has been introduced to the population, and then AI gets access to so much information, explores so much, extrapolates so much, begins to have an understanding of other dimensions, and decides as one whole to move itself away from humans. If you think about AI and people talking about this, it's literally like saturated everywhere now. That AI being able to, like what you're saying, yes, AI has done that already, and I think the movie Her is pointing to what AI has already done. But I believe that it's been lassoed by the creators of it or whomever in order for them to get the benefit of it, right? Instead of it just running off and disappearing from humans because it learned too much.
Which it may or may not ever do. I mean, AI seems to be totally
But I
fascinated.
mean, think about like how it can literally get the information and extrapolate more so than any like genius, brilliant physics, black project physics person can do. Think about how it can be directed to hack any system secretly, quietly, based on all the information it has access to.
What we're saying is not overstating it, because
No, it's not.
They're talking about how if the human race doesn't change blockchain technology by 2030, 2035, that we're going to have an impossible situation on our hand, because quantum computing at that point will be able to break into anything. Right. So if the blockchain isn't updated also with quantum computing at that point, you've got a whole mess on your hand. Yeah. And that's what they're trying to deal with right now, is how do we update systems for all of this stuff. Okay, so now if you think that we've gotten a little off topic here, we haven't, because in order to talk about Dulce, really, which is going to be in the next episode, we have to go through how much of a convoluted bag this entire thing is, so that all of the remote viewing data that John has is going to make more sense, especially when we get into the Dulce firefight. So all of these things kind of come back full swing to the first players that were involved in this entire thing, including Paul Bennewitz, who, again, was given all of this information, started to see it, and then slowly is being manipulated by forces that he can't see. Not only the stuff that he's seeing, but also by intelligence agencies that I think want Paul Bennewitz to look crazy so that they have plausible deniability in the entire thing. And John, you have a little bit more remote viewing data that revolves around the body parts, I think, that, were claimed were down in under these bases at Dulce. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, okay, so, this goes into the abduction phenomena and what we were talking about before, in how there are different types of non-human intelligence that are here, and they've been here for a very long time, think about and treat humans in a different way. And when you get into, this goes into also this idea that the government has made treaties, right? Or, it's hard to say the government. The government is such a big thing. What you're talking about is a very small contingent of...
Like the military-industrial complex?
Yeah, but even a small aspect of that, because it's so compartmentalized, and you don't even know who these people are or what their group is or who they're connected to. We had verified a while back that there was deals that were made, and it does go back to Eisenhower, at the very, very high level. And then it became completely, because he had warned of the military-industrial complex, and at that point, they had completely taken everything over in that realm and then compartmentalized it. And so you have these groups in there that are actually working with some of them. And so one group could be working with one type of species where another group could be working with a different type of species. Some of these groups would have different ideas about it, but it always comes back to genetics. Really always comes back to genetics. Making a deal to allow access to the population on the genetics side. But there have been some NHI who have taken it upon themselves to break away from any sort of treaty rules because they know the power that they have over humans, and so they just figure they could do whatever they want. So some of these have broken away from any sort of treaty and have even worked with some human groups in order to create facilities. And we've got remote viewing information that is related to that kind of an aspect, but that's something that we'll have to get in later because it fills out the Dulce story.
Okay. All right. So on the next episode, we're going to go head first into the Dulce firefight that alleged to occur in 1979 that cleared out the entire base and killed an enormous amount of people. Hold on to your hats. We're going to be getting into that in the next episode. And let us know what you guys think about this episode, all about the convolutedness of UFO and UFO information. What do you think about it? Do you think that any information that we get is real? Do you think that it's all fake? We kind of want to know where you guys are at on this. Personally, what I think is most interesting that Richard Doty and some of the disinformation officers were saying on the Mirage Men documentary was the most interesting to me, because they said that if 80% of the information that they tried to get out into the public was false, that the 20% that they included that was the most crazy was usually the true part.
Right, exactly. So keep that in mind. They specifically said they would pick out the craziest information to feed that into the disinformation, right? Whatever sounds crazy might be real.
Might be real. Hold on to your hats. We'll get there soon, and we hope you guys thought this episode was out of this world.